There's a kind of silence that doesn't feel empty. It feels heavy, like the air itself is holding its breath, waiting for you to finally break. That's the silence I sat in last Tuesday night. Phone in hand, screen glowing, replaying the same 2 minutes and 19 seconds that ruined the next 10 years of my life. Her voice was soft in the beginning. Too soft. I thought she was crying. Then she laughed. That quick, sharp kind of laugh that sounds like someone letting out the truth too fast. No, Colette, you don't get it. I'm not nervous about the wedding. I'm nervous I'll miss what I have now. That line, that exact sentence, I can still hear it when I close my eyes. I don't remember pressing play the first time. I just remember how my thumb wouldn't lift off the screen afterward. The message kept looping, every replay slicing a bit deeper, like a song I couldn't turn off. Harlan's perfect. Too perfect. I can't live like that forever. I need mistakes. I need the spark. I need him. I didn't even know who him was at that point. And I wish I never found out. The weirdest part? The voice memo had my name in the title. Not because she meant to send it to me, no. It was named after me because that's what she called the conversation. Harlan, the backup plan. Backup plan. That's what I was. My fiancée was talking to her sister about how I was her insurance policy. How she couldn't risk ending up alone if things with the other one went wrong. She said, and I quote, "If he never finds out, everyone wins. He gets the nice version of me, and I get to keep my secret." I replayed that part 13 times. 13. It wasn't anger I felt, not yet. It was something colder. A kind of stillness that lives right before the collapse. That night, I sat on the edge of our bed while she brushed her teeth, humming that stupid song from her favorite commercial. She looked at me through the mirror and smiled, toothpaste on her lip. She had no idea. When she leaned in to kiss me goodnight, I remember thinking how terrifying it is to realize the person you love is capable of living 2 lives inside one body. One that hugs you, and one that talks about you like your furniture. I didn't confront her. Not then. Instead, I saved the audio file, copied it, labeled it, and left my phone face down on the nightstand. The next morning, she told me she loved me before work. I told her I loved her too, and it was the first lie I'd ever said with a steady voice. Because I already knew. I was leaving the next day. She laughed in her sleep that night. That's the detail that won't leave me. Not the words in the voice memo, not the name she whispered, not even the plan she confessed to her sister, but that laugh. A soft, breathy giggle, like a teenager on the phone past curfew. I lay next to her with my eyes wide open, her body warm against mine, her hand curled loosely on my chest, as if nothing had changed. But everything had. Everything was already dead, and she was still dreaming in the ashes. I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling fan spinning slow, like it too didn't know what to do with the heat trapped in the room. It was 3:13 a.m. when I got out of bed and sat on the bathroom floor, back against the tub, playing the voice memo again. Not to torture myself. I wish I could say that. But because I needed to make sure it was real. I kept thinking maybe I imagined it. Maybe I misunderstood. But there was no mistake. Her voice was clear, cruel in how casual it sounded. "I just need to get this out of my system before I settle into my beige little forever," she had said. "Harlan will never ask questions. He's the kind of guy who says sorry when you bump into him." It wasn't the words. It was the precision. She knew exactly who I was. And she hated me for it. That morning, she made coffee like always. Almond milk, a dash of cinnamon, the kind of routine that used to make me feel like we were domestic and comfortable. I watched her pour it into a mug I bought on our Asheville trip, the one that said life's too short for bad vibes. Irony is a cruel little beast. I asked her how yoga was. She smiled and said, sweaty, but needed it. She didn't know I knew. She didn't know I had already opened her phone in the middle of the night, knowing the password she'd never changed, my birthday, for God's sake, and seen the unsent messages, the muted thread with a contact saved under Justine, nails, but filled with texts that had nothing to do with acrylics. That wasn't a nail tech. That was him, the one from the voice memo. And there it was, plain as morning light. Tonight was unreal. You make me forget I'm still engaged. I felt like a stranger in my own life. She was barefoot in our kitchen, sipping coffee from a mug I bought, wearing my old college t-shirt like it meant something. And yet, she wasn't with me. Not really. Not in her mind. She had already rewritten our story, and I was just a side character keeping her schedule on track. I didn't say anything that day. I helped her clean. I watched a movie with her on the couch. She rested her legs over mine like she always did, as if our routine was proof that everything was fine. But I couldn't hear the dialogue. All I heard was her voice in that recording, laughing about how boring men make the best husbands because they never suspect a thing. And still, I stayed silent. Because if I was going to leave, I wasn't going to just leave. I was going to vanish in a way that would haunt her. The thing they don't tell you about heartbreak is how normal everything looks while it's happening. The faucet still drips. The dog still whines for food. Your toothbrush still has her lipstick smudge on the handle. I spent that Saturday watching my own life move around me like a set on a stage. Familiar, but fake. Every piece of it suddenly artificial. I started noticing things I'd never paid attention to before, like how none of our framed photos had just the two of us. There was always someone else in them. Her mom, her coworkers, her friends. I wasn't her center. I was her accessory. That morning, she left early for her hair trial. Another wedding thing. Her third appointment this month. Except I knew from the voice memo in her phone that it wasn't a stylist she was seeing. I knew his name now. Evan. I still don't know if that's better or worse than not knowing. Evan, a name so aggressively bland it almost offended me. But apparently, he had something I didn't. Rough hands, she'd texted her sister. Like a man who's actually lived. I fix computers and ask people to reboot things for a living. My hands are clean. Too clean, maybe. I didn't follow her. That would have made it feel like a movie, and this wasn't a movie. It was my life unraveling in real time, and I didn't need a front row seat to what I already knew was happening. Instead, I spent that day slowly removing myself from the life we built, piece by quiet piece. I started in the bedroom. My drawer, the one she never opened because she said my folding style gave her hives. I emptied it into a suitcase I hadn't touched since our New Orleans trip, the one where she spent most of the time texting Colette and laughing at things she wouldn't show me. I deleted the Spotify playlist we shared, the one with our song. Except it turns out it was her and Evan's song too. I know this because she referenced it in one of her unsent drafts to him. When I hear that song, I don't think of Harlan anymore. That line felt like it had teeth. I changed my password on everything. Netflix, Hulu, our shared grocery list. Even the smart lock app she didn't know I still had admin control over. I wasn't being petty. I was being methodical. I was the backup plan. The safe choice. The beige safety net she thought would always be there in case her real life with Evan didn't pan out. But the thing about backup plans is, they can walk away too. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that I had a backup plan of my own. And it wasn't loud or dramatic. It wasn't some grand confrontation with shouting or tears. It was silence, calculated and complete. I scheduled a mail forward. Transferred money out of the joint account. Only what I put in. No pettiness. Just precision. I didn't want revenge. I wanted out, and I wanted her to feel the empty space when I was gone. I wanted her to wake up one day and realize she didn't have someone folding her socks, fixing her printer, or asking her if she'd eaten. I even made a folder on my desktop called In Case She Denies It. Inside, the voice memo. Screenshots of messages. A video of her sleep talking. The night she giggled and said Evan's name at 2:11 a.m. I recorded it because I needed proof for myself. Proof that I hadn't gone mad. That she was really doing what I feared, even in her dreams. I never planned to use it. I still haven't. But knowing I have it, it helps. She came home around 3 p.m., all smiles. Said her hair girl, nailed the vibe, and asked if I wanted to see a picture. I said I had a headache and went to lie down. I couldn't look at her. Not when I knew that 20 minutes earlier, she had been sending Evan a photo of herself in the mirror with the caption, "Imagine this walking down the aisle. Still think I'm worth stealing?" She didn't know I'd already packed my suit. That the next morning, I'd be gone before she woke up. She didn't know the backup plan had grown teeth. And she didn't know I was finally done being beige. She didn't stir when I stood over her. Just laid there beneath our linen sheets like a painting of someone I used to know. Her arm was stretched across the bed, fingers curled into the spot where I usually slept. I wondered if her subconscious noticed I hadn't been beside her for hours. Probably not. Her dreams were somewhere else now, somewhere sweaty and reckless and decorated with someone else's cologne. That much was clear. The sun was just barely rising, slipping through the blinds and painting gold lines across her face. For a moment, I froze. Not because I doubted myself, but because I wanted to remember her exactly like this. Peaceful, unaware, and still mine, even though she hadn't really been mine for weeks. Maybe months. Maybe ever. I didn't leave a note. That would have been too kind. Too soft. She always said I was too soft, didn't she? You're like hugging a memory foam pillow, she once joked during an argument we had over something as stupid as dish detergent. I bought the wrong brand, which, ironically, was the one she originally chose. But in her world, being wrong was part of who I was. Something reliable to mock, like my routines, or my sensitivity, or how I always cried a little at the end of The Iron Giant. She didn't get that movie. Said it was too sad for a cartoon. Maybe because the robot never got to have boundaries either. My bag was already in the car, packed neatly in the trunk between my old guitar and a shoebox of receipts I could never throw away. I checked the time. 5:42 a.m. Not a single neighbor outside. I shut the door slowly, careful not to let it click. She'd sleep until at least 9. She'd stretch, yawn, probably text Evan before even brushing her teeth. I could already picture her morning. Lazy robe, her mug with the chipped handle, one AirPod in her left ear while she swiped through memes on Instagram, pretending the man she promised to marry hadn't just ghosted her in the house they picked together. I didn't take everything. That wasn't the point. I left the coffee grinder, the framed photo of us in Vermont, even my favorite hoodie, the one she always stole and sprayed with her perfume when I traveled. I left things that would haunt her by their absence. A toothbrush removed. A drawer left open. No shoes by the door. I wanted her to notice what wasn't there. The only message I sent was to her sister, Colette. A single sentence, no punctuation. You might want to ask Emmeline where she was Friday night. I didn't wait for a reply. I didn't expect one. But I knew that little crack in the foundation would spread. If she tried to lie, and I knew she would, Colette would press harder. Sisters do that. And eventually, that voice memo would surface. The one she forgot she sent. The one where she casually ruined everything I thought we were building. What hurt most wasn't even the cheating. It was the narrative. The version of me she carried in her head. The spineless man-child who folds socks and says thank you too much. She never saw the version of me that watched her mother when she had the flu, cleaned up her brother's DUI mess, or spent 3 weeks learning how to install floating shelves because she liked the Pinterest photo. That version wasn't convenient for her story. That version wouldn't make Evan feel like a forbidden thrill. I drove for hours without music. Just the hum of tires and the weight of silence pressing on the space beside me. I didn't cry. I wish I could say I did. That I had some cathartic release, tears dripping down my beard onto the steering wheel. But I didn't. I felt still, like someone who'd just come out of anesthesia. Numb, aware, but unable to move fast. By the time I checked into the motel, my phone had 17 missed calls and 5 voicemails. None from her. All from friends. Her friends. People asking if I was okay, or if I needed space. Someone must have noticed I was gone. Probably her best friend Megan, the only one who ever treated me like a real person. But not Emmeline. No, she hadn't called. Hadn't texted. She was probably still asleep. Still dreaming. Still unaware that by the time she opened her eyes, I'd already rewritten the ending. The call came in at 3:14 p.m. A full 10 hours since I walked out of the house we were supposed to grow old in. I saw her name flash on the screen just as I was about to bite into a gas station chicken sandwich that I already regretted purchasing. It was like the universe waited until the exact second I had something in my hands, something messy, just to test me. I stared at the screen until it dimmed. I didn't answer. I didn't even flinch. She didn't leave a voicemail. Of course not. Bethany always hated voicemail. She said it made people sound desperate. Funny how that works when you're the one dialing. I watched the call log pile up slowly over the next hour. First one missed call, then 3, then 7. It wasn't panic at first, it was control. She thought I was ignoring her because I was sulking. She'd done this before. Once, after a fight about how she always checked out emotionally during important conversations, I went silent for a day and she sent me a text that said, "I love you, but you don't get to manipulate me by withdrawing." That always stuck with me. How she twisted silence into guilt, as if boundaries were weapons. But this time, I wasn't sulking. I was gone. And that silence? That was the sound of the illusion collapsing. By evening, the text started. At first, they were almost sweet. "Hey, are you okay? You weren't here this morning. You forgot your hoodie. Call me?" Then, they shifted. She must have checked the drawer. Seen it empty. Noticed her toothbrush wasn't next to mine. Realized my running shoes were no longer at the door. Her tone changed quickly. Where are you? What is this? Harlan, I'm serious. You're scaring me. That last one made me pause. Not because I wanted to comfort her, not after everything, but because I realized she was finally waking up to the truth. I wasn't playing a game. This wasn't a passive-aggressive sulk. This wasn't me waiting for her to chase me with some romantic apology and a tub of ice cream. This was absence. Full and intentional. And it terrified her. I sat by the motel window, phone face down on the nightstand, and watched cars move in and out of the parking lot with no real urgency. I was invisible there. Just another guy in a too-small room with bad curtains and a broken vending machine outside. And honestly, I preferred it to the house full of fake throw pillows and secrets. Around 6:41 p.m., she finally said the words she probably practiced in the mirror. If this is about Evan, I can explain. I laughed. Out loud. Alone. It was the first sound I made all day besides the sigh I let out when I walked into the motel lobby and saw the place had no coffee. If this is about Evan, the audacity of it. The conditional guilt. Like maybe there were other things this could be about. Like maybe I accidentally found her taxes and got upset about her filing status. She was still trying to control the narrative. Still pretending that maybe she could get ahead of it. What she didn't realize was that I'd already sent a copy of the voice memo to her sister. Not to ruin her life. Not even to get revenge. But because Colette deserved to know she was being dragged into a lie. She'd vouched for Bethany. She told me, once over a drink, that Bethany had changed since being with you. I didn't realize until now that changed didn't mean improved. It meant hidden. By 9 p.m., the texts turned to please. Her last one of the night simply read, "Please, just tell me what you're doing." And for a moment, a brief, fleeting moment, I almost replied. Not to reconcile, not even to hurt her, just to answer. Because I've always been the guy who explains himself, who softens the blow, who gives people closure they don't deserve. But then I thought about what it would mean to let her drag me back into her orbit. To allow her the dignity of an explanation after she so casually erased me in a 2-minute voice memo, filled with giggles and contempt. So I put the phone back down, and I let it ring again when she called the next morning. And the next. Because for once in my life, I wasn't going to play the backup plan. I wasn't going to be the safe harbor she returned to when her adventure got too cold. I was going to let her sit with the silence. With the absence. With the version of me she never thought could leave. She didn't know it yet, but I wasn't just gone. I had already started building a life where she never existed. She only ever met the version of me who apologized too much. The man who triple-checked the locks at night because she couldn't sleep unless she heard the click herself. The one who sat quietly in the passenger seat while she ranted about people I didn't know and arguments I wasn't part of. She loved that version, not because he was lovable, but because he was manageable, predictable, safe. But there's another version of me. One she never asked about. One she didn't know existed because she never cared enough to look beneath the softness. That version of me woke up on the third morning in that motel room, stared at the cracked ceiling, and decided not to disappear quietly anymore. I wasn't going back. That part was never in question. But something inside me shifted when I realized just how thoroughly she had rewritten who I was in her own story. I wasn't just the boring fiancé in her narrative. I was the fool, the placeholder, the emotional doormat she paraded around because it made her feel righteous, like choosing a good guy redeemed her for all the things she was still doing behind closed doors. So I decided to become untraceable. Not just physically, but emotionally. I turned off the location sharing she forgot I had access to. I disconnected our Apple IDs. I removed myself from every account we shared. Utility bills, food apps, even the wedding website she had meticulously curated with staged engagement photos and a quote from a book she never read. And then I did something I hadn't planned. I messaged Evan. Just one line. I hope she gave you the same speech she gave me. About how this time it's real. No threats. No drama. Just a nudge. Enough to light a match in the corner of their dishonest little room. I don't know if he replied. I blocked the number immediately after hitting send. It wasn't for him. It was for me. A quiet acknowledgement that I existed in this story too. That I wasn't some passive blur in the background of their affair. I spent the rest of that day driving. No destination. Just gas station to gas station, letting the miles stretch out between me and the man I used to be. I thought about the things Bethany never asked me. What I wanted from life. what I feared, what memories I had of my father, who died when I was 10. She never knew I had a panic attack the day I bought her ring. Not because I was unsure, but because I was terrified she'd eventually see the real me and leave. Turns out, she never had to see the real me to walk away. She just built a version she could disrespect, and then cheated on him instead. That night, I stayed in a different motel, this one with stained carpets and a flickering hallway light that made it feel like a horror movie set. I didn't care. I slept better there than I had in months. No voice memos. No lies. No pretending. When I checked my phone the next morning, there were no new messages. Not from her. Not from her friends. Just a quiet inbox and a new kind of silence. Not the heavy kind, but the freeing kind. The kind that comes after a fire, when all that's left is smoke and open sky. It hit me then that Bethany wasn't just afraid of being alone. She was afraid of being with someone who saw through her. And now, she'd have to sit with herself. Without the backup plan. Without the perfect alibi. Without the man who folded her towels the right way and laughed at jokes that weren't funny just to keep the peace. I wasn't coming back. And this version of me, the one with nothing left to lose, was finally free to exist without explanation. You don't realize how much of a person's presence hides in the things they leave behind until you start seeing ghosts in objects. A strand of her hair still clinging to the inside of my jacket. A receipt from a restaurant we both pretended to like because it looked expensive. A single earring I found in the glove compartment 2 days after leaving, small and silver, with a missing stone that always caught on her scarf. I don't even know why I kept it. Maybe because it reminded me of how something could look flawless at a glance and still be broken underneath. I think, in a way, that described her perfectly. I had driven almost 500 miles by then, crossing 2 states without realizing it. The world blurred into gas stations, rest stops, and cheap motel coffee. But every time I thought I'd outrun her memory, it found another way to sit beside me. She existed in songs that came on the radio, in road signs pointing towards cities we once talked about visiting, in the way the sunlight hit the dashboard the same way it did when she would sing along to old pop songs just to make me laugh. It wasn't the big things that hurt. It was the quiet familiarity that followed me everywhere, like the ghost of a life I was still trying to unlearn. 3 days after my last message to Evan, I got an email. Not from him, from her. The subject line was just my name. No greeting, no preamble, just 3 paragraphs that read like a confession written by someone who suddenly realized she wasn't the hero of her own story. She said she made mistakes. She said she wasn't thinking clearly. She said she never meant to hurt me. And then, as if those lines were rehearsed, she added that she wanted to explain things in person. But what could she possibly explain? That she didn't mean to send the voice memo? That she only said those things because she was scared of being ordinary? She had spent years convincing herself that loyalty was boring and love without chaos was meaningless. I had loved her quietly, completely. And to her, that was the same as indifference. I didn't respond. Instead, I sat in a diner off the interstate, watching a couple in their 20s argue over pancakes. They were probably fighting about something small, syrup or bills or a missed text, but the way they leaned toward each other, the way they still wanted to be heard, hit me harder than I expected. I realized then that what Bethany and I had wasn't love. It was performance. She didn't want connection. She wanted an audience. I had spent years clapping for a show that was never about me. The waitress came by and refilled my coffee 3 times. She asked if I was driving far. I said maybe. That was the truth. I had nowhere to be and no one waiting for me. And somehow, that didn't scare me anymore. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like a supporting character in someone else's story. I was just a man in a booth, drinking burnt coffee and starting over. Later that night, I checked into another motel, the kind where the carpets smell like rain and dust. As I unpacked, something fell out of my bag, a Polaroid of Bethany sitting on the hood of my car, smiling. The photo was taken months ago, back when I thought happiness was a default setting, not a privilege. Her smile in that picture wasn't fake, and that made it worse. Because it reminded me that there were moments, real or not, where she did love me, or at least thought she did. Maybe that's the cruelest part of betrayal, realizing that it wasn't all lies, just enough of them to ruin the truth. I placed the photo on the nightstand and stared at it until the room went dark. I didn't cry. I didn't curse her name. I just felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, clarity. She was my past, not my punishment. And the version of me she broke had already died back in that house, long before I ever packed my suitcase. Still, as I drifted off, I couldn't help but think, if she ever truly realizes what she lost, will it hurt her the way she hurt me? Or will she just find another audience, another backup plan, another man to fold her chaos into something that looks like affection? Either way, I knew one thing for certain. The next time she saw me, if she ever did, she wouldn't recognize me at all. It was 6 weeks later when I saw her again. I wasn't planning to. I had driven back to the city for the first time since I left. Not for her, but because my best friend Liam was getting engaged, and he wanted me there. Somehow, despite everything, I'd managed to start healing in a quiet little town 3 hours south, renting a small upstairs apartment over a bakery. The landlord was a retired carpenter who told too many stories and baked bread every Thursday. The mornings there smelled like cinnamon and forgiveness. But when I stepped out of the bookstore near my old neighborhood that Saturday afternoon, arms full of wrapped gifts and a takeout cup of coffee, there she was, Bethany, standing across the street, wearing that beige coat I bought her last Christmas, the one she said made her feel too modest. She looked thinner, tired. Her hair wasn't curled, just pulled back in a rushed kind of way. I don't know how long she'd been standing there. Maybe she'd followed me. Maybe it was a coincidence. I don't believe in those anymore. She saw me. She froze. Her lips parted like she might speak. I didn't stop walking. I didn't cross the street. I didn't even slow down. But I did glance back, just once, and in that brief moment, I saw it. Regret. Not just the kind people fake when they lose something they didn't appreciate. This was deeper, a sadness that bloomed in her eyes too late, like someone realizing they'd boarded the wrong train after it had already pulled away from the station. She raised her hand, maybe to wave, maybe to call out. I turned the corner before I found out which. And just like that, it was over. Not the pain, not completely, but the grip it had on me. The story I'd been stuck inside for far too long. She had made her choices, and I had made mine. Back in my new town, life moved at a slower pace, but somehow it felt fuller. I started painting again. Nothing serious, just oils and messy canvases I'd tucked behind furniture. I joined a trivia team at a small bar down the street. I read books I always said I didn't have time for. And one afternoon, while waiting in line for coffee, I met someone. Her name was Elise. She smiled like she meant it, asked questions, and actually listened, and when she laughed, it didn't feel like she was holding something sharp behind it. We took things slow. No promises, no pressure. Just honesty. Just two people trying to exist without pretending. One night, a few months later, she asked me what my last relationship had taught me. I thought about it for a long time before answering. Then I said that some people will love the version of you that's easiest to control. But the right ones, they love the version of you that doesn't flinch when the world tries to erase it. She nodded, didn't press, didn't pry, just took my hand under the table and held it like it was something worth keeping. And in that moment, with the smell of coffee in the air, her thumb brushing mine, the weight of my old life far behind me, I realized something simple, powerful, and long overdue. I was no one's backup plan anymore. I was finally my own beginning.